So this is the package specialization subgroup meeting for the 20th of April. I'll share my screen. So what I propose, maybe Bala, for today is to review the PRs. I mean, or go through the PRs and try to see whether we can help or have people look at stuff, right?
Yes, I think that's a good plan.
Or look at the status, but I think maybe the PRs, because we can actually GitHub. I kind of, yeah, today I'm a bit behind, so there has been some reviews. So I think there is some maybe I think the first thing that we have to probably look at is that the API, probably less, but there is one important one, I think, but that's not reflected to us. This one is an important one, I believe. So this is actually so given with our specialization, we kind of, so in the beginning, we went from the beginning interface and then we went all the way back. But I think we agreed to reflect the status back in the original CR such that upstream and downstream, you remember the discussion from the SDK, is reflected back in the original CR. So what this is about is adding the status in the interface in the CRDs. Before the status was kind of empty. So what we are proposing here is that the IP allocation status that is coming from the IPAM or the VLAN, it's just reflected inside of the status of this thing, and the same for DNN, it's only IP allocation. So that's what this CRD is about. But this is an important one for the functions because they use this, or they are going to use this. So this one is something, if some people can look at this, that would be
I'll definitely look at this as soon as this meeting and up. I mean, we have one more meeting out. This before the end of the day. I'll definitely look at this.
Yeah. So that's I think here, the other two are enhancements, so they are not so important, I think. So I think if we focus on this one, 12, that would be great. Yeah. And then Nefio Pro, so the other stuff is in Nefio, I think.
Do you mind adding it to the agenda item there? That way, folks.
Yes, that's a
PR number.
I would rather suggest put it in the Slack link rather than the agenda item because then it's very handy. If it's agenda item, then
okay.
I mean, is it okay, Vish? Just adding to the Slack?
No, it's fine. It's only that as part of the agenda item that was discussed and there is a priority, so it gets captured, and also putting in the Slack is also good. Anything is fine.
Yeah, I'll put it here, right? So maybe this is API. Right?
Yeah,
cool.
It's because it goes in spirit with what we had a question with Istvan asked, I think. Yeah.
Right. So that is that one. Then repository Nefio. So then we have, so there's a bunch of them. Okay, maybe I'll start from the top, right? So this is the SDK. So there is a design document in it. So this file is actually the design and how you consume it. What is missing at the moment from the SDK is the test coverage. So we are still adding tests here. So at the moment I'm at 30%. So we are still adding the tests, but the rest, I think, this is a big one, right? I split it also up into pieces, the files, but the amount of code behind is rather big, right? So here you have inventory.
Is this the one that we discussed that we can break into multiple PRs, or was it a different one?
No, that's the IPAM that's for next week for the IPAM and the VLAN allocator, right? So This is actually the full SDK. So which is having it's the SDK that we are using in the functions to do this for and watch and owns and stuff like that. Yeah. So I don't see how you can split this one up, but what you see is that the amount of code is rather, some files are very small, but so I try to put it into pieces that it's easier to understand what each of the files do. So I try to contain the code within the feature, within the file. So the inventory is kind of what is being used by the SDK. So the way it works is that you read the resource list from the CAP package, and then we store it in an inventory, and that inventory is then consumed by the SDK to perform its functions. So that's kind of the way it works. The inventory is kind of a cache of the status, and we update that, and based on that you have, the div is there, readiness gate is there, resources are there. So that's kind of how it is. And then the SDK, you see, the code itself, so the way it executes, so it executes this thing in a sequence, basically. And it can stop depending on where you add. So it populates inventory, it lists, so this is just a debug. So this will be, this is just there for debug. It calls global watches, populate children, update children, and then generate resources. So that's kind of what the SDK, the sequence, how it works. But try to split the code into pieces such that they are more readable, I hope, but I don't know. People have to see what they think about it, right? But this is going to be an important one because all the functions are depending on this, right? So what is missing at the moment? So the coverage at the moment so I have coverage for this is almost complete now. So I still have to do a check-in for this one. And we are starting to put the coverage on these guys here. So this will be done by Monday, but the code itself will not change. The testing, there will be just test files added.
Correct. This is how it works, right? In general, you have put in the PR and you know that you're going to add some more. The idea is that, as you keep adding to the PR, people will get, knowing that it's going to be on Monday. If we start reviewing it now, we'll slowly come up to speed. And by Monday, when you push another commit with the other test files, people probably would have a chance to review, get familiar with it, and put their comments. So, and that's okay. That's how it happens usually. It doesn't have to be perfectly done before it gets put in.
Yeah. Plus, for example, what I would love to have is people reading the design thing.
Yes.
So this is kind of explaining or trying to explain how it works or what, and so
that is awesome that what you have done, adding the design as well, which will give some sort of guidance to PR reviewers what this is all about.
And this is actually, I roll it in such a way that actually the people implementing a function should use this as or at least that was my attempt. So I don't know whether I've succeeded. To have people who are implementing this function, that they should use this as a guideline on how they should do it. So
yeah, this is a great start. Even if you think it's not perfect, we don't know, but just the fact having this is good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Wim, I had one question on that. So, and because in the earlier sessions, you always talk about the notion of a diff, and you have inventory. What does the diff actually do?
I also try to explain in here. So because Bala made the same request from the previous. So what the diff is about is the following: is so we read the current resource list. So all the files that are inside of the package are being read and stored in that inventory for quicker lookup, actually, right? And what then happens is the function gets called, and when you populate it, so so the way I always try to explain it is that the function gives a result based on the latest data. He has no clue what is in the package, right? So he gets represented with a set of CRDs or KRM resources, as we call it, through that for object. And based on that, he generates new CRDs, right? And so what happens is in the inventory, we store what we call the existing resource, so the current one which is in the package, and we also store the new resource, right? And what the div does, so there is various stages into the div if you look at the code, but you could have a fact that the existing resource was not there, but the new resource got created to the populate function. So in which case you have to do a create operation, right? Another thing that could happen is that the existing resource is there, but the populate function did not create it, so you have to delete, right? Or what you could have is that both the existing resource is there and the new resource is also there, in which case you have to compare whether there is a change or not. If there is no change, you don't have to do anything. If there is a change, you have to update it and perform the right actions based on that div. Actually, the action is just set a condition. So it's very simple, is apply the new resource and set a condition. So the only complexity of the div is the comparison of the spec. All the rest is kind of, is this resource there? Is it not there? Delete it, create it. So it's very simple actually, except so there is one part, but it's also not so difficult, is the comparison of the spec itself.
Okay, got it. Yeah.
You
So
see,
basically, it handles all the eventualities to the lifetime of the package. That's what it is.
That's
I
correct.
was getting confused. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And so it's mainly needed for updates. So initially, of course, you create resources, but then later, for example, someone could in the package delete an interface. So we said, okay, it's probably a bad example, but in theory, it could happen. Say, for this UPF, I don't need an N3 anymore, right? I mean, it's probably a bad example, but I think of something like that. Or another a better example probably is instead of the DNN, I need two pools instead of one, right? That's probably a better example. So in which case you have to allocate a new resource. Or it could say, I change the pool request. I don't need a prefix length of X and I want to change it. So these are type of scenarios that you can think of why changes could apply. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, I was thinking because because you don't have the state of from the previous run exactly what you're comparing against. So got it. So it is basically based on the current state and potential changes that might happen between T1 and T2, and then you try to kind of decide what to do.
Yeah. And the current state is actually the only thing that represents the current state is the current KRM resources inside of the package, right? That's a bit the state, because we are not applying it to the Kubernetes API server. So here the existing state, if you will, is the existing content of the package.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah. So that's what's there. So it's not a very complicated diff, if I'm honest, but we have to go through all the scenarios, right? There is conditions, there is, so you see there is conditions. So that's a bit the code behind. But I try to explain also in the comments here the principle behind, right? So I try to explain it. We have an inventory populated with the existing resource condition info. We also have information of new resource condition that would be created if nothing existed. And then the div compares okay, there's a typo, I see. Existing resource condition inventory against the new and provide CRUD operation based on the comparison. So that's kind of, so I try to explain a little bit, or I don't know whether it's good enough, but yeah. That's what I try to do.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I think that will be very helpful.
Yeah. All right. So that is. So this will, need probably a bit of work. So this is not complete, but I think the code and the design is actually already things where people could look at. So that's 125. Wait, so let me put that in the Slack as well. Then we have, I'm not sure this is us. Yeah, so this, I think you reviewed, Bala, right? So this is the new parser interface.
Yes, new parser. Yeah, I actually reviewed the base one that you did.
Yeah, this one, right? And then, yeah, it has a reflection on the other, so there is a dependence.
Yes. So I added my comments. I know Iswan added his obviously the new method he chose. He added that. I had my so that was very, so we decided we'll go this way for now, and then
Yes.
Iswan, that implementation later. But regarding the method that we chose, I had I looked at this one. I also looked at how it's being used.
Yeah.
Either in IPLOC or the interface. And then
You suggested something. I saw that I haven't addressed it, but I will do later today. So I will fix that. I agree with you, by the way. I saw, but okay, I said, okay, let's do something and not everything.
Yeah.
That rather than having it as part of the interface as just a library function that you call.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree
Just-
with that. Yeah, sorry.
Just one insertion, what I added to this PR is not the set spec that I ultimately want. I actually implemented this parser interface in an alternative way. I've sent you a PR via the Nokia repo,
Okay.
and I just use that. It is exactly the same functionality. The same tests are passing with 90%, 92% coverage. So it is exactly the same functionally. It is just a different implementation, and it shows that it is basically just aliases. And that's what I used to basically add some arguments to Bala's proposal at the end.
Okay. So what is this? That's the one, right? So what are you proposing? I can do split view, right?
so is it is it for the base one that he did, Iswan? Just wanted to understand. I reviewed a few 2-3 PRs yesterday.
So again, what I did, so now we have an implementation of the parser interface in the parser.go file.
Yes.
I didn't change the interface, but I just replaced the implementation. Again, same interface, same functionality, same. I didn't touch the interface or the test. And if you look in how I implemented it, then you will see that all of the methods of the interface are one-liners. Basically, what I did, I avoided checking null pointers by design. So I removed one indirection from the implementation, and that's why I had to check null pointers less. And that way, all of the functions implementation became of the methods became one-liners. And the other thing I did is that we have these 4 functions that you also mentioned, Bala, that are basically converting back and forth between the cube object representation and the Go struct representation, various way. These new from cube object, new from YAML, get Go struct, things like that. And those are also implemented as upstream SDK functions. So none of these that I committed, you can see that it doesn't import anything new. There are no utility functions, anything. It is only implemented by the upstream SDK that we are using.
But in this case, you still have all the.
It doesn't have the set spec or get spec, anything that I proposed.
No. But what you do is basically the interface itself is still complete. Whereas I think what Bala is suggesting is to even remove a bunch of stuff from the interface. I think,
So
right?
I'm just to, first of all, thanks Iswan doing this. I'll take a look. Obviously, I'll understand better. So what I was proposing was in the very base. So basically, we have all these functions and all these function libraries, right?
Yep.
So interface, IP allocation, NAT, etc. So for all of them, very common thing is we create that base structure using the cube object function.cube object, And then we have different helpers, like you said, it's one like from cube object, from convert that to ghost trap, etc. So what I was thinking is the base things, don't even make it a interface or anything. Make just for
A library call.
helper functions.
I think, Bala, what you are suggesting is remove all of this from the interface. I think that's what you're suggesting, from what I understand.
Yes, I was suggesting create one base entity, and that base entity will contain the cube object and expose that cube object by capitalizing it, so that if the callers want to make modifications, they can directly access it. They directly have access methods to it. So that should cover most of the things. And in individual, that is at the very fundamental library level, and at the individual libraries that you wrote, Vim, like interface or IP. So just implement the method directly on the base structure itself. Let's not create
similar what we did for resource list. So it's basically an extension of the cube object.
Yes, exactly. Yes. So basically, that base entity itself, we can create a few. For example, I liked some of the getters. I know Istvan, we have slightly different philosophy here, but some of the getters that you implemented, I like it because you're making it easy. For example, I don't need to know the path, things like that. So, but implement it directly on the base object, so that in every library, we don't need to create those base structures anymore. Because
it's basically an extension. It's basically what we did for the resource list.
Exactly. Yes.
And the thing, and then you have access.
Yes, I think if I look at the code, I think that will reduce the code by more than 50-60%.
Probably, yeah. I agree.
We will also look at Istvan's thing. Istvan, thanks for doing it, and then probably we'll pick the best from both approaches.
But you get you get a bit of a mix. But I think Isti, what Bala is saying is going in line with eventually adding the get spec thing, because that's then a generic additional method of the existing object. So
yes,
I think it's a good approach.
That's what I wanted to say, that I am proposing two things here. One is that I ultimately proposed before, and yes, in that proposal, I wanted to get rid of these kind of interfaces at all. But now the second thing that I wrote, and I sent a PR for to demonstrate, is that, okay, we have the interfaces, but it is Bala's proposal about how to implement those more efficiently, and how to use the common denominator. So for example, we discussed it with Ganesh, ran into a problem of using the current implementation of the parser when he wanted to create these kind of interfaces from another common ancestor, namely that he wanted to create the generic NF deployment mutator, and then he wanted to basically inherit, in Go it is almost inherit, so inherit or aggregate this in the UPF deployment, SMF deployment, and IMF deployment mutators. And in this case, he couldn't use the parser in the generic NF deployment mutator, because the parser is a generic object that needs the type of the final, in this case, the UPF deployment. So he couldn't use the parser in the generic NF deployment mutator. I'm not sure if you can follow this in words, verbally. It is quite hard to follow, I understand. But I'm just saying that just now, an hour ago, we came up with another problem with this current implementation, and that is fine. So basically all I said is that what Bala says is definitely an improvement. If we do not have the parser interface as a common parent for all the, and its implementation as a common parent for all the other mutators, let's just have utility functions, helper functions in this base library that the implementers of the various mutators like the DNN and other mutators can use. That is much more composable It can be
But
used
then
for like
we
rubrics. Yeah.
should also
It-
change the
it's-
name from parser to cube object, probably, right? Because
Yeah,
what
I
we are
think
doing
I,
is
I think
extending
it's
that. Sorry.
yeah. Go ahead, finish your thought, Pim. I'll go later. Yeah.
Yeah, so what I was saying is that we should, it's basically, it's an extension of the cube object. So in other words, it would be type cube object struct, right? Then function
Yes.
cube object, and then its additional methods as a capability, and then you can access the existing methods still as they are available, right? So that would be the way forward. And then if we have get spec, we just add get spec to the thing, and then you have the capability. going
Absolutely.
forward.
Yes. Yes. I was thinking the same lines, Wim. So I was trying to see how we can eventually go to what Istvan is proposing. Like
Yeah.
So in my Istvan, just to be clear, in my case, what I'm proposing is what I called in my prior review as base entity. So in the base entity is where you create the base object, and where you can get it from YAML, you can get it from cube object, you can get it from Ghost struct, and do vice versa. And that's the base entity, and every library, NAD or interface or IP, they will just add methods to that base structure. I'm proposing, even if you want to get rid of the interface, we can completely get rid of the interfaces from every library. We can just use that base. If you want to keep an interface definition for abstraction, that's fine, because the base structure would anyway satisfy that condition, because we would have implemented all the methods of that interface. So interface is, at this point of time, is kind of a add-on at this point of time. But what I'm saying is, we have a base entity, and let's implement all the library functions in the individual library files on that, and the individual function creators will create that base entity and just call the methods.
Yeah. No, I think we are saying the same thing. So in other words, what you have is we will have cube object as in the function SDK. We will have a generic extension in the what we call parser, but probably I will rename it to cube object. And then we'll have individual implementation, which extend it further, basically, right?
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah, I see that point. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. So I'll rework it this evening, and then yeah. So once I have it, I can trigger it. But so yeah, this is also an important PR, I think, to get further reviewed. But I will rework it this evening, and I can ping the status. So so this is 121.
Yeah. I knew this was an important PR. That's why I reviewed it yesterday. And one of the Istvan's PR too, that was the base one. I think that got merged.
Appreciate for sure. Rid of this.
So by the way, thanks, Wim. I used it as my enhancing my knowledge on generics. It was a little bit. Then I had to read up a little bit on how the generic types worked in the Go.
Yeah, so it's an interesting thing, but I think it's now also it came clear that the way to do this extension, this probably it helped also me, by the way, to I come up, because I think the strategy that we have now seems to be one that we can apply in multiple cases. So
Right. Yes. We can use it just like the way you did in resource list, probably. Yeah.
One thing I saw with resource list, I found one thing is that the linter was complaining by doing that. By the way, there was one linter that started to complain with that method, which was complaining about embedding.
Should not. I'm not sure why the linter should complain about that. By the way, I realized this thing. I was trying to see the interface composition principle here. I was thinking, okay, we will implement this base methods in this base interface, and then we will do the interface composition principles to augment the functionality. Then that's when I learned yesterday, and you may already, the experts may already know here on the Golang, for the interfaces that uses generic types, you cannot do that. For example, if it's a reader writer interface, let's say, if it's a base interface, right? Let's say, forget about generics now. Let's say there's a reader interface, there's a writer interface. And then if you want to have a composition of reader and writer, you can say reader writer and they just say reader and writer, right? Without actually instantiating that. But that we cannot do that if the interface is based on generic types. That's the lesson I learned yesterday.
That's correct. Yeah, that's it. All right, so that's that PR, and then these two are derived from it. So these are depending on that, but so I'll rework these as well, right?
Yeah, I put that comment actually on those two as well. Yeah.
So they will. So I will rework this, but then I'll rework the others, right?
Yeah.
They are depending on 121 rework, right? But that will also be the. It's not too much work, so it's and this one as well.
By the way, in 122 and 23, you ran into the same problem that I did, is that it contains files from other PRs. I'm not saying that it is bad. I did the same thing, to be honest, in order to be able to test and compile my code. I don't know what is our policy should be in this case when a PR depends on the code of another still unmerged PR.
Yeah, I also didn't find a good strategy. What I see, I added it for the testing, but the only thing that I see right now is you have to rebase. So the order of these PRs becomes important going
exactly
forward. And then we have to rebase them, I think. But
yes. So for example, you will add new commits to PR 121, and old files from that PR are in 122. And if we merge 122 later, then we have to be very careful not to override the changes of the previously merged PR. Yes.
Yeah. Correct. So the way what I did right now is I don't know the right strategy either. So far, I'm also experimenting a little bit, but yeah. So this is the base PR. So what I did here is when I checked in. So what this is explaining 122 and 123, I still use the code that is in here, but I use it here because these guys are depending on this. So otherwise, none of the tests work. Okay. So now, eventually, I think once we have this approved, what I will do is I will remove the parser code from this guy, rebase, and then that will be the final stage. But if you don't import that original code here, you cannot do anything here. None of the tests will work. So the brow will fail and everything will fail.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think it's a key thing. I was also thinking yeah, I think whatever you explained, Wim, other than that, even I don't know I can't think of a method.
I don't know how other people have dealt with this.
Sorry, I got disconnected. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, okay. So are you guys discussing dependent PRs and parent PRs?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, at least we know when we use OpenStack, we were using Gerrit, and basically would have a base PR. On top of that, when you create a branch, you can go pull that on. When you create your new branch, you will first be you'll make your current branch the base PR, and then you create a branch, from that base PR.
That's what I'm doing. But the problem is, the problem with that is that if this PR, so this is exactly what we did here. So 121 is our base PR, and 122 and 123 are basically a branch from them. Okay.
Okay.
So the problem is now, let's say some changes are happening here.
On the base or
the base?
Yeah.
So you have to rebase, right?
Yes. You need to rebase.
That's basically what I'm doing. But in order to rebase, the code that is here is seen as part of this repo somehow, even if this is the base PR. And so I'm not sure how the rebase, typically what I've seen before is the rebase fails. So in order to make the rebase work, you have to delete that dependent code that is here, remove it, rebase, and then check in this, because then then that dependency is gone basically, right? The dependency got imported through the rebasing.
Okay.
That was my problem, that because I've done this same approach before. And so what you have to do then, in order to make your rebase succeed, you have to remove that old, the code that was imported from here. If there are changes, if there is no changes, it will be fine. But if there are changes, you will have to, or at least that's what I had to do, remove those files that were depending on this. And then I could make it work. But it's a bit of,
Yes.
it's a bit of a
Basically, you have to, in rebase, when there is a conflict in the dependent code, then you should have the policy that always use what is you are rebasing onto, because that is the latest. Or basically, that is what you are doing if you just delete the files and rebase like this. That is basically the same.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a while though that I've done this. So at least one other thing I realized was when they're doing this rebase, if you have multiple commits, that seems to actually, I've seen in the past, that seems to make the rebase a little bit of a headache, but I haven't tried it in the recent past. Let me try that.
Yeah. I've dealt with some issues, so I delete, at some point I delete, I rebased, and you either have to say trust this thing and all the rest is void. But okay, I mean, yeah, we'll have to experiment a little bit more and then share the best practices. That would be good.
Correct. At least one of the best practices is if you have dependent PRs, at least seems like we know that. I think it's the rebase is the problem at this point of time.
Yeah. Okay, then which one are we next? Validation function interface. What is this one? This merge. So that is the rework. Okay, this can be, I think this one can go to the bin, by the way. So that's the discussion we had on Friday last week, Vish and Bala. But because this new approach will this new approach will overrule this, so this can be closed. How do I close it? Close. Yeah. This can disappear, I think. What is this? Is that not the one? Okay, maybe I refresh.
By the way, this is a very good exercise. Wim, I really like it. I think we should generally do it across all the groups as well. We are essentially doing a PR triage, so which is really good. I really like it.
All right, then NAD function. I think you will see that this is getting in shape. So I think, yeah, because we have to commit through Nokia. So I think there's a few PRs in the Nokia repo that I have to push here, but I think the NAD function is almost, I think I have to check the latest state, but this is also getting ready, almost. At a diff lib, this can close.
Yeah, that can close. So
I just need to, let me one thing, because I need to import some of the tests that Ganesh did here. So I will do this if I close it, but this can close, yeah.
Got it. So on the NAD stuff, right, Wim, I just wanted to understand, since it's a function, so I have a feeling that, does it also have the dependency on the library?
So all the functions will have a dependency on the SDK.
Yeah, SDK too. That is there, but also does it also depend on a library for NAD particular?
Yeah.
So basically, since I asked that because since both the SDK and the library that are in flight, do you think we should review the? I think my understanding is we need to review those first ahead of the functions themselves, right?
Agree. Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. So Yeah, the library genetic interface. I hope we can close on that after I have done the changes.
Yeah.
Then yeah, each of
So-
those libraries use that. So we have to do probably a little bit of rework in each of them, aligned with that new approach. And then so those libraries go in, and then the function will depend on the SDK.
So that is true, Bala, what you are saying that, so if we finish the library before the functions, then it will avoid a lot of rewrites of the functions themselves every time when the library changes. However, for example, when Ganesh, no, sorry, it wasn't the, it was Akash, I think, sorry. Akash started to implement the mutator lib for the NF deployment types. He ran into this problem that we haven't thought when we designed the library, that not just there will be another parent object, and that will cause some trouble, and so on and so on. So as we start to use the libraries and the SDKs, that is how we discover problems. And that's why I would, at this stage, I wouldn't mind rewriting the functions a couple of times.
Okay.
And so while we are writing, so you design a library. The most important part of both the SDK and the library is the interface. The implementation we can optimize later. We don't care about that. We will have a lot of time to optimize it. What we have to get right is the interface. And the interface you design from the consumer side. So you have to write consumer code, meaning the functions themselves, in order to discover problems with the interface. Does this make sense, what I'm saying?
Yeah, makes sense. Yes. Yeah. Sure.
And that's why I would rather rewrite my own function multiple times and get, and as a byproduct, get the library interface, making the library interface better and the SDK interface better, than finalizing the library, and then I have to use that SDK, and it will be very hard to change the interface after that.
Yes, yes, I agree. Thanks for pointing that out. I think you're doing it. You know, there'll be a little bit of back and forth iteratively. Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks.
Yeah, we have to. So I think we have a first approach, right? And then we will have to see how we get along, and then we optimize, right? So that's what we have to do, right? At least, but yeah, given that we want to start testing, at least we have to have one common approach, and then okay, then we will see how we can make it better along the way, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Another technical, and that is purely technical thing that we can discuss before we go through further, because it belongs to the SDK. Yeah, this is the very first commit of the SDK. So Vim has this 125 pull requests. I even know the number by heart that contains the new SDK. Can we just, because there is nothing from the SDK right now in the repo, can we just merge it into the repo and know that it will be not the final thing, but that would ease the problem of basing PRs on other PRs and so on and so on. So would it be possible to do the review while there is at least something is already in the repo, already merged?
That's why, but I
just
think,
from a purely technical point of view, sorry, it would be easier.
It's not my thing, but so that's why this thing is also in the highest priority. So I would welcome people to review this ASAP, because merging this, the sooner we can merge this, everybody will benefit from it. Yeah.
Yes, and I'm saying that I know that I have a lot of review proposals for that particular thing, but I would rather see it merged in this current state right now, and later then I will send pull requests to incrementally change what is there. But then, for example, I could write at least some version of the DNN function that would compile, where the pull request in its own would compile.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah, one is Stephen here. I mean, on one hand, yes, I understand what he's saying. On the other hand, Wim also said he's trying to increase the coverage on that. Right now, it's around 30%, if I remember properly.
Yeah, that's correct.
So, yeah, I mean,
Okay,
yeah,
fair enough.
We may have
So-
to take a call. Yeah, at some point. I mean, to Istvan's point, right? We have just 2 more sprints, and if so much is dependent on this, I'm a
So
Yes.
which piece of it do you need, basically? I mean, see, if we make so many exceptions, this will become like, folks will not get a chance to review. That's my concern.
Mhm.
If you look at his PR and you find that there's 1 or 2 things that you definitely need, then we can go using that angle. I know, because the PR is huge. Do you need everything that is out there?
You can basically only have the interface, right?
It is, I think it
That-
is
that is
divided
where-
into the smallest part that it is possible. That is, by the way, one of the problems that, for example, for my KRM function, I am dependent not just on another Amherst PR, but on actually 3 other Amherst PRs that are next to each other, and I need the code from all 3 of them. So it would be very hard, for example, I believe, to divide this SDK that Vim is showing right now further, because it is one consistent thing, the runtime.
Yeah, this is
practicalities.
yeah, this one, and today is what day? Thursday. So can we make it a goal to have a couple of reviews on this between today and tomorrow, and then to certain shape, and then have a goal to at least have a goal to merge it by end of day tomorrow? Would that be helpful?
Yes,
Yeah,
that's
yes.
yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yes, and I okay. I just wanted to say, I understand the thing about the test coverage, for example. That is fair enough. I will have to increase the test coverage, because tests we should have, of course. But I was thinking about that. For example, in this next day, I won't give big change request review, even though if I think would increase the quality, because I would rather see it working in this stage, and then I can create PRs to change it later.
So, but is there not a way to actually grab this PR into your branch or into your fork and use it as a dependency and still make progress for yourself?
Well, of course, I'm doing that. So what I
That
did,
is
for
probably the
example, is I
best way,
merged
because
all
most
of the
people-
PRs. I merged all of the PRs that I need into my cone. But then, of course, in my PR, there was a lot of file that the reviewer shouldn't see or shouldn't review, because that doesn't belong to this PR. Of course.
Because with that, whatever
can
you
solve this.
find are gaps can be PR review comments for this PR, That's
That
the
is
way
happening.
you
That
can-
is already happening, what you are saying. Yes, we are
Okay.
finding bugs and we are reporting it back to the original PR. That is happening, yes.
Just making sure that
let's
all the
make it a
options are
goal.
exhausted.
Let's review it today, today and tomorrow, and we'll have 2 days, today and tomorrow. How many ever possible, let's review it, and let's give the comments to the authors, and let's make it a goal to merge it by end of day tomorrow, if possible.
Yeah. We'll definitely make our best effort, but you can see as though already that there's so many files that somebody has to digest it, go through that,
Right.
all that stuff.
It will take time,
But-
by the way. If you go through the whole, that was my comment yesterday, right? In order to get through the process by Monday to merge all of this stuff, I think it's a challenge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I
I
mean, we understand the goal, Bala, but yeah, correct. I mean, you're doing
It's a
a fine
trade-off.
job.
I think the question is, it's a trade-off between, do you want a full review versus do you want to start testing? I think that's the trade-off that we are acting upon,
Yeah.
or is there another way to can start testing? Because what you could do is just get all the code from all the PRs, merge it in and start a build. You can do something like that, right? But it's not really merged into the mainstream yet.
Yeah, that's why I was like asking earlier, Istvan, I mean, a very generic question. If he looks at this PR, which of the files does he think is important for him, right? That he needs to go off and get it merged and tested. So that way it will be targeted and we can look at those files and we can review them. Because this includes everything. I mean, I think, Wim, you probably said that everything is interdependent here, all those files.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing will not work if you remove something.
If you remove, yeah, exactly.
So what I'm suggesting is, yeah, let's give it. This was in my list anyway this afternoon, because let's do the PR. I think we could do it. At least a couple of us could do the PR today, and then give the comments to Wim, and then Wim will be working on the either test coverage for this, and then the base library stuff, and then probably we can. I know yeah. Let's at least shoot for it and see what happens.
Correct. And it looks like Istvan already has got a workaround for this. He's able to grab his PR and he's able to test it out. But
yeah, but we are doing
and not just me.
All of us.
No. What
All of
Istvan's
us,
point
yes.
is not that. Istvan's point is the pain.
Yeah, it's exactly. That's what I'm saying. But meanwhile, see, for example, for me, I do better with reviewing code when there are tests, because for me, I can go look at the test cases. It's a good readability for me, to get accustomed to the code. I go look at the test and trying to see what that function is doing, and I play with it, and then I try to understand the logic. Right? That makes it easy for me. So different people have different.
So inventory. So just on that note, inventory test coverage will be complete by end of today.
Yeah. So I think it's in general, whatever you went through the process in order to actually use a PR that is in review. I haven't done this in a long time, but if you can actually call out how to do that, that'll be great to share with others who want to.
So it is not just me. There are multiple people writing PRM functions
exactly.
right now, and we all can work. So it is not a blocking issue per se. As Bala said, I just want to decrease the pain of it.
Correct.
Because none of us, we discussed this, and none of us has the silver bullet, meaning convenient solution. We all of our solutions have some drawbacks so it is not comfortable.
To do the balancing act here. I can tell you this, the balancing act of actually making sure that the reviews are happening, the tests are covering. Somebody has to just speak up, right? So I'm speaking up. I know Bala is the release lead. He's also trying to do the balancing act. Just making sure that we don't lose the opportunity to review code when we have a chance completely. That's all.
Yes.
Yeah,
multiple priorities at the same time. That's the problem, right? We have.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, we have 2 days, right? Let's today and tomorrow. Let's do the review, and then let's see where we are.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, yeah. So I think we are running out of time, probably. But yeah, the rest. I saw all of these functions. So I need to check NED function and this NED function. I will have a look. Which one is to be retained? NF deploy function is remaining. DNN function, interface function. So all of these are going to be
dependent on that. Yeah.
Yeah. So no, they are dependent. But what you see is that if I don't think it's realistic to have all of that on Monday, but you will have all the code is there, but we'll have dependencies, right? So all the code will be there, but I doubt that this is going to be merged in the main code.
Yes, that's fine.
Impossible.
Yeah, it's possible. Yeah, I think we will. Yeah, it was a lofty goal to start integration testing, but we can still. I knew the integration testing when I said third sprint. I did not mention when it could happen anywhere in the third sprint.
Sure,
Probably
sure.
it just could happen maybe towards the end of third sprint. Let's see.
No, that's okay. Yeah. At least see what is good is with the pressure is that at least we have tried to get all the code there, right? So that's at least the good part. Of course, we need to get it through the chain of reviews and all of that. And I think I somehow I agree with Fish. It's let's not compromise on that because
Right.
the whole process is going to be important going forward. So we need to keep that alive, I think. Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. I understand that point as well. So we can we can do it as I said. We can work. So it is. It is, and it will be easier, by the way. So whenever the first version of the SDK, whenever will be merged, whenever the first version of the libraries will be merged, everything will be much more. So it is just a temporary pain.
Correct.
I know that we are out of time.
Yeah. See, if we had actually a sprint review, one of the things pain points would have been like, you know, if we had a retrospective, we would have called this out, right?
Yeah.
And say that, look, we don't have enough time for reviews. And that will be used for the planning. You know, we don't want to lose out on that. That is why I'm speaking out.
Okay.
And that's what I raised yesterday in the call, right? I said, okay, the biggest challenge is going to be the reviews and getting it in merged, right? So because I think it's a big dependency, we are underestimating, I think, a bit.
Yeah, exactly. So which means
actually, sorry, the time check. We need to start another
we need to
meeting.
stop.
Yeah.
Okay.
Have a good one. Yeah.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Bye.